This story, titled The Web of Lies, begins with a woman named Sarah. She's 47 years old, a school teacher who spent her life helping children find their way in the world, guiding them through their struggles and triumphs. She's always been the steady, calm presence in a world that can sometimes feel chaotic. But now, Sarah found herself standing at a crossroads she never imagined she'd face, wondering if the very foundation of her life was built on a lie. Sarah's story starts like so many others. She met Josh, a charming, ambitious man, 6 years ago. They clicked instantly, and what started as a whirlwind romance quickly grew into something serious. Josh was everything Sarah had ever wanted in a partner: handsome, attentive, caring. He made her laugh, and she adored him. The way he talked about his future, his dreams, it was infectious. They soon moved in together, bought a cozy home just outside the city, and began to build their lives. Sarah had always dreamed of finding someone to share her life with, someone who could match her own values and ambitions. Josh seemed to be everything she wanted and more. But the cracks in their relationship were subtle, barely noticeable at first. Josh worked as a consultant, or so he told her. His job was demanding, he would explain, which is why he was often away on business trips or staying late at the office. Sarah didn't mind. She trusted him, believed his explanations. He had his career, she had hers, and it all seemed to fit perfectly. They were partners in every sense, sharing responsibilities, dreams, and plans for the future. But one afternoon, everything changed. Sarah had come home early from school, feeling a bit under the weather. As she walked through the front door of their home, she heard voices in the living room. At first, she thought it might be Josh on a conference call, but then she recognized the voices of two women, and they sounded familiar. Confused, Sarah walked closer, curious, her steps slowing as she reached the doorway. She peeked inside and saw Josh sitting on the couch with two other women. They were laughing, chatting like old friends, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a pang of discomfort. She had never seen these women before, and yet there was something about the way they interacted with Josh that felt too casual, too familiar for strangers. She stood there for a moment, unnoticed, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Suddenly, one of the women stood up and kissed Josh on the cheek. Sarah's heart sank. Her instincts screamed at her that something wasn't right, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She stepped back quietly, retreating to the bedroom, trying to make sense of the scene she had just witnessed. She had so many questions, and all of them seemed to pull her in different directions. But one thing was certain: she needed answers. After some time, Josh came into the bedroom, looking flustered. He had clearly been caught off guard by her early arrival, and the awkwardness in the room was palpable. He sat down beside her, and Sarah waited, her eyes locked on his, willing him to explain. "I can explain, Sarah," Josh said, his voice shaky, but not in a way that suggested guilt. More like fear. "I've been meaning to tell you about them. They're friends from college. They came into town, and I didn't want you to think I was being disrespectful or anything." Sarah took a deep breath, the confusion only deepening. "Why didn't you tell me about them earlier, Josh? Why did you keep them a secret?" Josh looked away for a moment, his hands fidgeting in his lap. Then he finally spoke, his voice soft and hesitant. "I didn't want to disappoint you. I know how you feel about my career, about how busy I've been. I didn't want you to think I was slacking off or letting you down." Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. Slacking off? That's what he was worried about? The lie was beginning to take shape, but she couldn't bring herself to ask the question that lingered in the air. She knew the answer was about to break her in two. "Josh," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "what do you mean by that? What are you really doing? What's going on?" Josh hesitated again before his gaze met hers. "I wasn't completely honest with you," he confessed, his voice steady but with a hint of guilt. "I don't actually work as a consultant. I've been working for a small tech startup for the last few years. They can't really afford to pay me what I told you, and I've been living beyond my means. That's why I've been so distant lately. I didn't want you to find out and think less of me." Sarah's breath hitched as the truth came crashing down on her. Josh hadn't just been lying about his job. He had been hiding the entire financial reality of their lives. And for years. She had been living in a world built on a foundation of lies. His consulting trips were simply excuses to cover up the time he was actually spending working a job that didn't pay enough to support their lifestyle. The business trips? They weren't business at all. They were just a front for something far more complicated, far more unsettling. She felt betrayed. like the ground beneath her was being ripped out from under her. The future they had talked about so many times, the plans for their life together, suddenly seemed like nothing more than a dream that had been built on lies. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling now. "Why didn't you trust me enough to be honest?" Josh seemed to struggle for the right words, and for a moment he just stared at his hands. Then finally he spoke, almost as if he were talking to himself. "I didn't want to disappoint you. You always had such high expectations of me. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I thought if I kept pretending long enough, it would all fall into place." Sarah felt the weight of his words hit her like a ton of bricks. How could she ever trust him again? How could she move forward when the man she loved had built a life of lies? The tears that had been threatening to spill finally broke free, and she let them fall without shame. She was heartbroken, not just because of the lies, but because the man she had planned to spend the rest of her life with had been hiding a truth that would have shattered her trust forever. Josh reached for her hand, but Sarah pulled away. She couldn't even look at him right now. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I don't know if I can keep living in a relationship built on lies. How can I trust you again after all this?" Josh's face fell, and Sarah could see the desperation in his eyes. He wanted to make things right, to fix the mess he'd created, but the damage had already been done. The woman who had once trusted him completely was now questioning every word, every promise, every gesture. And Sarah knew she couldn't live this way. She couldn't live in constant doubt, wondering what else he had been hiding. As the days passed, Sarah found herself walking through her days like a ghost, haunted by the weight of Josh's confession. Every glance at him felt like she was seeing a stranger, a man whose words no longer held the same trust. It wasn't just the financial deceit that stung, it was the betrayal of the very foundation of their relationship. Sarah had built a life with Josh, a life she believed was real, filled with shared dreams and a future they were supposed to build together. And now, all of that seemed like it had been built on a carefully crafted illusion. Each night as she lay in bed next to him, she would feel a growing distance between them. The silence felt thick, as though words couldn't bridge the gap of trust that had been shattered. She thought about the future, about the life they had planned together. Could she ever look at him the same way again? Could she ever imagine marrying a man who had kept such a monumental secret from her? But as much as the betrayal hurt, Sarah couldn't stop herself from still caring about Josh. Deep down, she knew she loved him. She just didn't know how to reconcile that love with the reality of his deception. The heartache she felt was like a dull ache, constant and painful, but it was the uncertainty that gnawed at her the most. She had always prided herself on being a woman of reason, a woman who could see things clearly. But now, her clarity was clouded by the question of what to do next. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in her favorite cafe nursing a cup of coffee, she couldn't help but replay every conversation, every interaction, every smile Josh had given her. It all felt tainted now, every promise, every plan, every moment of happiness. It was all built on a lie. The thought of spending another day, let alone the rest of her life, with someone she couldn't trust felt unbearable. But leaving him meant tearing apart everything they had, everything she had dreamed of. Her phone buzzed with a message from Josh. "Can we talk tonight?" The message was simple, but it hit her with a wave of emotions. Anger, sadness, fear. The same question lingered in her mind. Could she ever trust him again? That night, they sat in the living room, the same place where everything had come crashing down. Josh looked more exhausted than she had ever seen him, his face drawn with guilt and regret. He seemed smaller somehow, as if the weight of his lies had finally caught up to him. Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. It was time for them to talk, to confront the truth of their relationship. "Sarah, I know I've broken your trust," Josh began, his voice low and steady, "and I can't begin to explain how sorry I am for that. I've spent the last few days thinking about everything, about us, about how I let you down. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or ever, but I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't want to disappoint you." Sarah looked at him, her emotions a storm inside her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man sitting in front of her was the same person she had fallen in love with. But the truth was, she didn't know him anymore. Not fully. The man she thought she knew had been living a double life, hiding behind a mask of falsehoods. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Josh," Sarah said, her voice trembling. How can I? How can I look at you and believe in anything you say after all of this? Josh's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Sarah saw him for what he was, a man who was deeply remorseful, a man who had made a mistake that might have cost him everything. I know I've ruined everything, and I understand if you can't forgive me, he said, his voice breaking. But if there's any chance, any tiny chance, that you can give me the chance to make this right, I will spend every day proving that I'm worthy of your trust again. I'll do whatever it takes. The words felt like a lifeline thrown to her, but Sarah wasn't sure if she could grab hold of it. She looked at Josh, at the man she once thought she knew so well, and asked herself the hardest question of all. Do I love him enough to take the risk? Could she put the pieces of her heart back together, knowing that the cracks ran deeper than she had ever imagined? It wasn't an easy decision. There was no right answer, no clear path forward. Sarah knew that healing would take time she wasn't sure she was willing to give. Trust, once broken, was a fragile thing. Could it ever be fully repaired? Or would it always be haunted by the shadow of the lie Josh had told her? In the days that followed, Sarah took a step back from the relationship. She spent more time with her friends and family, seeking comfort and advice from those who loved her. Everyone had their own opinion about what she should do. Some told her to walk away, to cut her losses, and never look back. Others urged her to give Josh a second chance, to see if he could prove that he was worthy of her love and trust. But Sarah knew that the decision had to come from her heart, not from anyone else's. She knew she had to follow her instincts and decide what was best for her, not what others expected of her. The truth was, she wasn't ready to make a decision yet. The pain was still too fresh, the betrayal too raw. As she sat alone in her garden one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sarah found herself reflecting on the life she had built, the love she had shared with Josh, the dreams they had woven together. And though she was scared, though she felt utterly lost, Sarah realized that she wasn't alone in this decision. She had the strength within herself to choose the path that was right for her, and so she made a promise to herself to take the time she needed to heal, to figure out what she truly wanted. She didn't know where this journey would take her, or if Josh would ever be able to prove that he was worthy of her trust again. But she knew one thing for sure. She was ready to face whatever came next, with or without him. If this story resonates with you, like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts below. What would you do if you were in Sarah's shoes? Would you give him a second chance, or would you walk away? Let's talk about it.